Hello, students. Good morning, all of you. Today, I, Rabindra Mohan Mishra from Sri Jagdamba Sanskrit College, Batho, am taking the class of Shastri first. Our examination is very near. Today, we learn the theme of the poem Death Be Not Proud. It is very good poem by John Donne. The beautiful poem Death Be Not Proud is composed by John Donne. John Donne was a great metaphysical poet. He is considered the pioneer of the metaphysical poet. Donne's Death Be Not Proud is one poem of a sequence known as Holy Sonnet 10. Here Donne shows his good concept of metaphysical theme. Donne is usually characterized as a metaphysical poet. The popularity of this theme lies in its unique subject, as it was a devotional as well as a warming to personified death. In this very poem, Death explores a theme he returns to elsewhere. He emphasizes the fact that death is not actually the end of human existence, nor it is necessarily something that should concern people. Usually using the metaphor of death, the poet argues that death is not permanent and it serves as an eternal pathway of life hereafter. He also has demonstrated the Christian doctrine of resurrection and immortality of the soul, calling death as an inferior. From the very beginning of the poem, death is shown very mighty and dreadful. It has the power to take the lives of all, but the poet denies its power, immediately saying, "Poor death," and announces that it will not kill him. He presents his idea of afterlife and says that death is just a way to the never ending world of pleasure and life. He strongly says people never die. The age old characterization of the death is turned upside down by the speaker. The speaker characterizes the death for its illusionary pride. Actually, for the speaker, death is a slave to other unseen forces of the universe like destiny, coincidences, kings, and desperate man, death becomes a passage from worldly weariness, pain, pleasure to the eternal pleasure and happiness. It is failure to the eternal pleasure and happiness. Death is more peaceful than the rest and sleep, which ultimately restore energy. The poet proves that the death is only connected to the negative and destructive forces of life, such as poison, battle, sickness, accident, etc. Opium and other drugs can bring sound sleep better than death because of the servile nature of the death and its connection with the evil events of the life of a human being. Death should not be brought. Death itself has finality and end on the day of judgment, but human beings have life after death, which is eternal. Donne has presented death as a powerless figure. He denies the authority of death with logical reasoning, saying that death does not kill people. Instead, it liberates their souls and directs them to eternal life. He does not consider it man's invincible conqueror. Instead, he calls it a poor fellow without having free will. The arrival of death is also compared with a short rest and sleep that recuperates a person for the upcoming journey. The poet's denial to the conventional approach of death gives the reader a new interpretation. The major theme in the poem is the powerlessness of death. The poem comprises poet's emotions, mocking the position of death and arguing that death is unworthy of fear or a. According to him, death gives birth to our soul. Therefore, it should not consider itself mighty or superior as death is not invisible. The poet also considers death an immense pleasure similar to sleep and rest. The death is personified and the speaker brings forth an argument. The argument is that death is not all powerful as we are forced to think. Finally, death gives us the way to the eternal life, a kind of freedom from this worldly sorrow. Death is just a sound sleep from which we will awake at the day of judgment. From that day, there will not be death. On that very day, death dies. So there is no reasoning in fearing of death, and death too does not have any logical reason to be proud of. There is no humility in his words as he tells death not to be proud. On the contrary, his choice of language is dismissive. He refers to death as a slave to human beings, making death appear small indeed as it is used by desperate men to end lives and summoned by human in war. Death becomes something of a service for humans, as he is described as offering soul's delivery. It is through the experience of death that people are able to reach their true destination in eternity. The poet imagines death as a rather pitiable braggart, asking why he should swell as if puffing himself up in pride, when in actually he is not able to achieve anything that cannot be achieved by charm and poppy. Done seems even to pity Death's weakness, calling him poor Death. This is a conceit which works well when the poor poem reaches its climax. At in short, we conclude that the speaker directly addresses the personified figure of death. He proceeds to mock, declaring that death cannot kill human beings. The poem ruminates on the nature of morality. If its speaker points out that there are so many ways to die that it is no source of pride to have dominion over death. Human are the master of death. The poem argues it better. When we reach heaven and thus immortality, death